Welcome back to another video, and today we will be doing my eyeshadow palette declutter. So this is the sort of beginning of the year 2024 declutter. I didn't want to do a separate declutter video before Christmas because I knew that during the Christmas time there would be quite a lot of palettes that I would be getting into my collection, so that's why I wanted to hold out for this one. But I think this is going to be a bit of a bigger one than my last declutter, but again I do know that there will not be like a tremendous amount of palettes that I will be getting rid of. And as with my first declutter video, which was I think was done last October, I will go through the palettes through by price or sort of categories. So first there will be drugstore palettes, then there will be the indie palettes, and lastly there will be the higher end palettes. But so that you don't have to keep staring at my black table desk, we will now start with the drugstore ones. So first palette, and this is actually something that we will be decluttering. So this is the Morphe Big Prim 35X palette, and this was a palette that a few years ago my brother gave this to me as a Christmas present, and I have actually used this decent amount. So I think if you've seen Morphe palettes, this is quite typical, and even though this doesn't look like it has been used a lot, it has actually gotten quite a lot of use because I have used this as a companion palette to my also all shimmer indie palettes that have sort of similar tones to this one. But there are no newer palettes in my collection, and this is at this point getting a bit old, so that is the reason why this is getting out of my collection. And next let's go to another brand that I have only individual of. So this is the iHeart Revolution or Makeup Revolution. These, I think they came out with this sort of chocolate dripping themed £5 last year, I think, and there is already one palette that I decluttered from this on my October declutter because I didn't like the color story. I still haven't used this, but I do want to get use out of this one, so that is why this is actually still staying in my collection, even though the color story isn't anything super original. And next let's go through my Beautybay palette. So there is, I'm gonna see if I can get them to fit to the frame, I think now. So there is gonna be definitely one palette that we will get rid of. So first is this Rich palette. This came out from them this year, and this is the 16-pan version of it, and as you can see it is this quite beautiful warm-toned burgundy palette. I did say in my drugstore sort of palette ranking of last year that this is a bit of a like one-trick pony, so there isn't like super many looks you will be able to do with this, but regardless of it, I do like it a lot, and it has this very good stable Beautybay quality, so this is staying. This is a palette in which I realized, so this is the neutral palette 16-pan version, and I realized after I did my drugstore palette ranking that I didn't rank this even though I got this with the Rich palette. However, there's a reason why I didn't rank this, was that I have actually used this only once. There is one Instagram reel or YouTube short where I have been using this, so that is why I didn't feel comfortable ranking it amongst last year's drugstore palettes, because honestly I haven't used it enough. But this year I will make it my task to use this. As you can see, it's this quite beautiful cool toned neutral palette, and so I will be included in my this year's sort of palette ranking, unless, for example, I decide to declutter it if I feel that the quality is not up to the par, but I can't really say anything about this because I only tried it once. And next, this one, the Midnight palette by Beautybay, and at this point now you can see this is practically, I haven't used this, I don't think I have even swatched this, and even though it's very beautiful, we all know my relationship with these sort of bright blue and purple colors. Even though I do have to give this credit, there is quite a lot of color variety in this. But I have now owned this palette 2 years ago, so this series that they had with these more colorful palettes, they came out with this few years ago, and I still haven't used this. So I think even though the color story is very beautiful and the shimmers are making me look like, wow, this is very pretty, I should use this, but I'm not. I know that if I haven't used this in 2 years, then I'm not gonna use it next year, so that is why unfortunately this one is going to exit my collection. So now the two big ones. So this is the Earthy 42 pans, and I usually say that you only need the 16-pan versions of these, but there are the two that I have bought the bigger versions. So this is how the Earthy palette looks like. This is this beautiful Sorry, that cover hit something on my desk, but yeah. So this is my sort of essential fall palette, and I did make use out of this fall, and it is the palette formula is still good. There isn't like any signs of it aging, so I am still keeping this. And this is one of those palettes that I would say that in terms of mix of colors, it is quite even like unique within my own collection. So this is a keep. It is a seasonal palette for me, but I do use it, and it's something that I do like. Next one is a palette that I have always said that you should buy the 16-pan version of this if you like pinks. Because I'm a huge fan of pinks, I did the decision about the bigger one, but I could have managed with the 16-pan version of this. But regardless, I am still like very happy with the purchase. I have used this a decent amount. There will be a Valentine's palette recommendation video coming where this is gonna obviously make an appearance, and it is like, if you really like your pinks, I don't think you can go wrong with this one. And because it's Beautybay, it's very affordable. There are these beautiful, more shinier shimmers. There's some satin shimmers. The matte quality is very sort of something that allows that it's quite buildable, but there is a lot of pigment and there's a lot of punch to it. Of course, if you don't like super punchy pinks, then this is obviously not gonna, you won't get any subtle looks with this one, just like with a lot of the other more colorful Beautybay palettes. But yeah, this is a favorite, even though in terms of size it is a bit unnecessary. But yeah, that was the last. Yeah, so that was the last Beautybay palette, and one palette that we did declutter from these ones. Next, some brands that I only have like a couple of palettes from. So first are my MUA palettes, and actually if you have watched my collection, you will realize that I have gotten a new one. So the Blush News was a palette that I did rank as my first drugstore palette from last year, and this is, I have said that if you're looking very good quality eyeshadow at a very affordable price point, MUA, these sort of plastic palettes are definitely the way to go. The matte formula is so effortless to work with, and there are the shimmers are very impactful. However, now that I have been trying this soft nudes palette, the matte quality in between these is similar, and if you have liked the quality that MUA does in these palettes, then the soft nudes, it doesn't make an exception to that. However, what I noticed with the soft nude shimmers was that they are also very impactful, but they are more these sort of traditional, like metallic shimmers. So I would say that a biggest difference, aside from the fact that this is a bit more peach and pink toned, and then this is like more traditional warm toned neutral. But I'd say the biggest difference is that if you're contemplating which one to buy, if you like these more wet shine sparkle shimmers, then I would get the Blush Nudes. But because I do know that there are people who also like these more traditional, very impactful metallic shimmers, then I would actually go with the soft nudes one, because these are, while they do make an impact on the lid, it's a bit different compared to this one. But obviously I am not getting rid of either of these. I like these very much, and as I said, these are my like #1 travel palettes, and just generally the looks that I get, creating looks with these is also very, very effortless. Next, let's go to W7. So this is the Influence palette, and this is duping the Huda Beauty palette, and I actually do remember which palette. So this is duping the Empowered palette. I tried this a couple of times last year, but I do want to get some. As you can see, it's not been used like a lot. I only did a couple of looks when I got it. So I still want to keep this and keep seeing, especially with the shimmer formula, because in the past I have had issues with the W7 shimmers. So I still want to keep on testing that had they improved the shimmers in terms of wearability. So my issue with W7 shimmers was that they like creased away completely from my lids. So if there was like a long day, then by the end of the day I didn't have any more, like the shimmer shades just disappeared. But with this one I felt that at least so far this issue has seemed to have gone away, but I still want to keep testing it, so this one is not going. However, what I am getting rid of, and this is not necessarily about the quality, so this is the Sherbet Cop palette, and this is duping the Natasha Denona pastel palette, and I do actually own the original Natasha Denona palette that this is duping. This only had the one like additional row here that the Natasha Denona palette doesn't have. However, I am not getting rid of this because there is a quality issue per se. I actually mentioned in my drugstore sort of palette ranking that if you're a person who uses pastel colors like a couple of times a year, maybe during festival season or during spring, then this isn't actually a bad option, because if you use only pastels like occasionally, I wouldn't spend the Natasha Denona prices. And the shimmers in this one were more satin-like, which for example meant that the shimmers in this one actually they did last on my lids quite well. However, the reason why this is getting decluttered is that my sort of like, aside from the Natasha Denona pastel palette, I do have the Cosmic Brushes Delights palette. We will be seeing the palette in this video, but because I sort of have, and that is the sort of pastel palette that I prefer to use the most. And so, and actually there will be also another pastel palette that I did get as a gift, as a Christmas present, that I haven't featured yet in any of my videos because it was stuck in the holiday package traffic, and I actually got it like maybe a couple of days ago when it finally arrived to my brother finally was able to get it and bring it to me. But yeah, so this isn't getting decluttered, as I said, because it would be bad quality or anything. It's just that I have pastel formulas, other pastel formulas and palettes that I do prefer, and I don't need like pastels. Like I do like wearing them, but I don't wear them every day, so I don't need like 4 or 5 different pastel palettes within my collection. Catrice next. So here again is a palette that I will be getting rid of because I now haven't used it and it's been sitting in my drawers for quite some time. So this is the 5 in a box palette that came out. This was already in the spring, yeah, because the fall edit last year in 2023, that didn't have, oh, it did have a 5 pan, but it wasn't this one, but this was in the spring edit. And I to this day still haven't used this one, so this is the, sorry, I'm gonna now check the name of it. This was the Diamond Lavender look, yeah. So this is the Diamond Lavender look. I can't really comment anything about the quality of this, but I have enough other palettes, and I do actually have lilac shades individually in other palettes, and as a color combination as a whole, this isn't like interesting enough to keep it just purely because of the color story. So just because of the lack of usage, I am getting rid of this one. However, what is not getting anywhere is this one. So this is the 5 in a box, and this is the Vivid Burgundy look. And while the quality of mattes in this one isn't the best I have ever used, the look that I am able to create with this because of the 2 shimmers that are in this one, it's this sort of very sort of vibrant, sort of vibrant and very sort of delicious looking dark burgundy look, and because this sparkle here is something that creates very, I can actually open this and show it, so it's this sparkle here that really creates impact on the lid, and that is the reason why this is keeping. And I actually do use this, I have used this quite a lot of last year. Another palette that is not going anywhere, so this is the Blushing Ocean. So this is the Pro Slim palette, and they have now renamed this line. So the pictures of the Spring Edit 2024 recently were released on Instagram, and now they are actually available in a lot of German retailers. For example, Cosmetic for Less, that ships quite widely around Europe, is for example a brand that you can buy the new Spring Edit palettes from. And the new Spring Edit palettes are now just they are just named as the Slim Eyeshadow palette, so they are no longer Pro Slim, they are just Slim palettes. But now back to this one. I am still going to keep this. I was very sad that I had to get rid of the other Pro Slim palette that I had, because I actually preferred the color story of it. It was this sort of like pinky purplish palette that had a bit of a pop of yellow in it, but unfortunately the formula of it had hard pan in quite many of the shades. This one so far, I don't think there's hard pan in any of these, and this will be a color story that when we are approaching summer that I will be using. And I am now considering getting one of the new palettes in the new sort of slim palettes in the line, because I was very sad that they didn't bring any of these bigger palettes in the fall launch last year. But yeah, so 2 Catrice palettes is staying, one going out. Last of the drugstore. So you probably, if you watched my sort of pre-holiday ranking videos, I already did mention in those videos the drugstore palettes, because of the palettes that are sort of easily accessible and available to me as someone who lives in Europe. It's a bit limited, and generally like our own drugstore brands, the drugstore palette quality still varies quite a lot, so it's not a primary palette category that I prefer. But the last one is Kiko. So Kiko is an Italian brand and is something that I do like Kiko's quality quite a lot. They are more expensive for a drugstore brand, but I do think that with them, most of the time the higher price, it's like, it's worth it. But there's gonna be 2 palettes that are going to get decluttered. So first one, if you watched my yearly eyeshadow ranking palette video and the review video, I sort of included this in because I did a video where I reviewed all 8 Kiko Milano products that I got at the end of December, November last year. And this is purely going away because of the quality. So this packaging of it pretty much like broke only like maybe a week when I got the palette from. So the glue in the pan hasn't been put there properly. And also the second reason why this is going is because there isn't a lot of versatility in this, and also because the shimmer shades, while they look very beautiful swatched, when I actually applied them to the eyes, they weren't as impactful. So that's the first one to go. The second one I'm a bit sad about. So with this this is from the holiday collection last year, and this was a gift from a friend, and now this was the holiday Fable Rose in Wonderland palette. The quad that I showed previously, that doesn't have a name because those quads are only available in Kiko store. I haven't seen them on their site online. But the Holiday Fable one is going out because the cap is broken. So this is very loose, and I'm quite afraid that every time I am moving this around in my sort of drawers that the shadows will fall out because the sort of locking mechanism has broken down. And the second reason why this is going away is that unfortunately there is only like one look I am able to do this with, and that is related to the fact that the other shimmer shade, which is this very sort of bright yellow gold, it doesn't really go with the other shades in the palette. So that's the reason why that one is going. Then I can just show the 2 others. So this was their holiday premiere palette from this year, or sorry, from 2023, so from last Christmas, and this is what she looks like. And I did mention in my yearly eyeshadow palette ranking that I do think that, for example, the shimmer shades, they are improved from previous years, and it's a bit basic palette, but I do like using this one. And the next palette that is staying is also, so this is their holiday palette from 2022, and again, here is what it looks like. I do think that the color story of this for Kiko palette, not in general, but for Kiko palette, is a bit original because there are some sort of lilacs and a bit of green in here. I really like the sort of creamier shade that this one has. My only issue, for example, with this was the couple of these shimmer shades. They look very opaque in the pan, but even if you dig your finger in them, there isn't very much payoff with them. But yeah, so the 2 sort of bigger holiday palettes are staying, and the 2 other palettes from Kiko are going away. That was drugstore. So now we're getting to the indie palettes, and this is the largest category of palettes, and there's quite a lot to go through. Let's first start with GlamShop, because there is also some that we will be getting rid of. So first one is are we on frame? I think we're now on frame. So first one, this is my sort of self-made palette that I have bought individual multichrome shades from. Let's see in what condition this is in. It is still quite, yeah, because I had with few of these multichrome shades, I had the issue that they only like after maybe half a year of getting them, they started like rising up from the pans, but the ones that are now here in this palette are actually all sticking to the pans, so we are good with that one. And because the individual multichromes are more expensive to buy than buying palettes, that's also a reason why I'm not getting rid of this. Now, this is the Zilone palette, so this was their sort of take on a green palette. However, they have since redone their sort of green 9 pan. I don't remember the name of it, but it is more sort of, I'd say it, when last summer in 2023 summer, when we had the grays of green, this sort of earthy mustard green palettes coming out, that is when also GlamShop like redid their sort of green 9 pan. I didn't get that one because I feel that with the Beautybay 42 earthy palette I already had like the green tones that I need, and green also isn't. I like some tones of green, but it's also not like a primary color. But this is what the Zilone looks like. This palette is no longer available, but I do want to keep this one because I do think that the Shimmers in this are very beautiful, and I do think that the tones also are something like as a combination within a palette or something quite unique, even though it's not the only green palette that I have. Then there are two palettes that I always group into one because these are companion palettes, so these are the nude palette. So first there's the all matte palette, and from this one, this totally matte nude, this is still available on their website, and this is what it looks like. And this is one of those all matte palettes that has, like, even though I have like a huge amount of neutral browns within my collection, these browns are actually quite unique because they are sort of, there are a bit purple toned mattes in here, and then there are these sort of like other tones of like brown mattes that I don't really have in other palettes. And I do think the quality of this is like one of the best matte quality I've gotten from GlamShop. Then there is the Totally Blusk, and I don't know why they don't stock this anymore because they should definitely still also stock the all. So this is the all shimmer one, and these shimmers definitely combined with the sort of matte one, like they make the perfect combination. And again, these are like quite basic, like how should I say, basic looking shimmers, but as with many GlamShop shimmers, these do actually have a bit shift to them if you shift to them. So a few of them are also like that they just look the same as they look in the pan, but there are also quite many of these that do have something extra to them. But yeah, these are like my two, I'd say if you have to say that what is your like one of your favorite neutral palette combos, like these two palette together are my sort of ultimate neutrals. But yeah, those are not going anywhere. Then next, the Pokusa. So this was their spring palette, I think 2022 year, because on 23 they did the Rococo collection, which I didn't end up getting even though I was contemplating of it. But this is what she looks like. And I do think that this is also like relatively unique to other palettes that I have, because it does have this sort of, there is like these traditional, like I think pink tones that are typical for spring, but there we do have some lilac here, and then there are these sort of warmer yellow and orangey tones over here. And again, the shimmers, as always, that is I think what GlamShop really does the best. There are some very nice and special sparkly shimmers. I would have to say that a lot of with these shimmers, especially these, sorry, I just hit my camera. So a lot of with these more chunkier shimmers, unfortunately you do have to use a finger with them. So if you're a person who prefers brushes, then this isn't necessarily, like GlamShop does a couple of shimmer formula. The smoother ones you can pick up with a brush and they don't accentuate texture on your lids, but just so you're aware that if you see these chunkier shimmers on their palettes, then those are something that if you have mature lids or textured lids, then they might not look as good on you, and you do have to use a finger, which doesn't of course give as much precision as using a brush. But yeah, this is definitely another key. Now lastly, a palette that it's time to let this go. So this is the Celebre palette, and this is like very old, because I think when I got this already, this was on sale, and I remember on that point they sort of advertised that this was an older palette. I think this was a New Year's palette from them, it's been some time since this was available. And while the tones of it are very pretty, there isn't, I'm not seeing any that there's any mold or anything like else wrong with the shadows, but it is, I think, now time to let this one go. I didn't end up using this even once during last year, and because it is starting to be more on the older side, and because there are like other palettes that I prefer to use over this one, it is time to let it go. So we are now going to the Oden's eye palettes, and there is going to be some that are going to be getting decluttered, and I am already very sad about that beforehand, but it is time, and knowing that the brand will be releasing something next year, like during this year, I will be getting more palettes from them, unless something very drastic happens with the brand's design and how they release stuff. But yeah, I'm actually gonna like rip off the band-aid and show which ones we are getting rid of. So this is I'm not fitting them in the frame, but you can probably, so it is time to say goodbye to the Saga of Freya collection, and I already, when I recently did a ranking video ranking my Oden's eye palettes, and while the this one, Tears of Freya, was something that I didn't like because of the, like I said, the color story was something that I thought that wasn't that original in my collection, and why this was my sort of least favorite Oden side palette. The Cat Spreads, or Cats with a Golden Carriage, and then this Saga of Freya, the book palette, actually are something that I do think have been still palettes that I do like. But yeah, I'm gonna show one last hooray for this one. So this is the Cat Spread palette, and this is something that I did say that to this day is one of my favorite Oden side palettes because of the color story of it is very unique and the textures. But it is getting, unfortunately, it is getting old, and there are other palettes now in my collection that I prefer to use. And this was the double-sided book palette, and I especially like this more sort of romantic themed side to it, but I did also use the more neutral one side, which was this one. But yeah, I'd say that on the year this came out, I think this was one of the collections that again made got Oden's eye a lot more. It made them like grew their sort of fan base, and the collection as a whole, I think it is still like one of their, as a cohesive collection, it is definitely one of their like best collections. But now these are just, it is time to just now admit it that these are now on the older side, and that brand's formula has developed further. And I know that during this year there will be more releases, and in order to be able to use the newer palettes and the other palettes that are perhaps a bit newer and that I like more, something has to give out, and it's these three that are now going out of my collection. And now we can just go through the rest, which are, none of these are going away. So this was the Jewels and Gem collection. Sorry, the palette. This came with the sort of jewel themed collection. I didn't get the green one because, as I said, it's not a primary color story for me. Very beautiful, sort of neutral mauve with a bit of muted colors. One of the, I think, better, like best releases they had last year. The original Angelica Nyqvist and collaboration palette. So this was the original Hela palette. This was the palette that I did rank as my first favorite Oden side palette in my recent Oden side palette ranking. Then the second Angie palette, so the Little Ghost palette. Quality-wise, very good, and I do like the sort of color combo this has going on. It's just that because of the blues and purples, this does rank a bit lower compared to some other palettes. But nothing wrong with the quality. I think, another very successful color combination created by Angie. Then the original Alva palette, and now before someone goes like that, wait, Alva was one of their OG palettes that came before the Saga of Freya, why I'm not getting rid of this one. I have actually gotten this after I have gotten the Saga of Freya palette, so I have gotten this, I think it was already getting to like the time when they were like discontinued, but they did like stock this quite a while, and so because I have gotten like this palette, even though as a palette release this is like older because this was they're one of their like OG palettes, but because I have actually gotten it later in the Saga of Freya collection, and I do think that the formula in this, because it is newer, it's not showing its age as much. But I did mention in the Oden side palette ranking that I would hope that they would perhaps like revamp this color story and come out with something like similar, this sort of romantic rosy themed color story like this year, but with their new upgraded formula. But because so far they haven't, that hasn't happened, I am keeping this until that happens. But yeah, next, another great favorite, the original Merry Christmas palette. Very beautiful, quite colorful, but still one of my favorites. Then the Christmas Eve palette, the only, how should I say, the only bluish purple palette that I do generally like, say that if I would have to choose one that I really love, then is this one, but that's because these are more muted tones, and this is a very, I'd say, one of those palettes that has surprised me how well everything in it works together. Then the two sort of like, I am seriously making the consideration, should I just declutter these, because I didn't like the quality of them. So this is the Hey Reindeer palette, and below it we have the Snowy Dreams palette. And I have discussed quite extensively on my channel now that I didn't know that did I get a bad batch or what happened, but mine's quality, especially in terms of the mattes, was quite horrible, and also some with the shimmers there were some issues. But because these are more pastel toned and lighter toned palettes, I will put these into my palette rotation later during this spring. But if I still feel after that I just can't make them work, then I will be getting, because I will most likely do my next declutter somewhere at the end of the summer, beginning of the fall. So probably then at half point this year I will be then making the consideration again that if I should get rid of these. But yes, anyway, those were all of my Oden's Eye palettes and the 3 palettes that I did decide to get rid of. So, Cosmic Brushes or Cosmic Beauty, this is a brand that I got to know first time during last year, but some of these palettes have been released originally like before 2023, but I got all of these during last year. I didn't get any of the palettes they released sort of at the second half of 2023, so I don't have the was it Gothic? It was Gothic themed, but I don't remember was the palette name. It was their first like smaller palette. It was the purplish dark one, and then the Winter Wonderland palette, because that is full of blue, these very bright blues and purples. That was another palette that I didn't get. But this one was my favorite indie palette from last year. So this, like from all the indie eyeshadow palettes that I tried last year. So the original Muse palette, and there is just something that makes your heart flutter when you look at the color story. It's so pleasing, and there's just something. The combination of sort of pinks and neutrals, and then there's a bit of pops of these earthy greens, and then there's a bit of color. But yeah, I'm not gonna go all over about how much I love this, but yeah. So Delicious Delights. So this is sort of my favorite pastel palette, and the reason why this is sort of ranks my favorite is that the formula, first of all. The pastels really do pack a punch. You don't have to go building in them, even though this is like a 40 € palette. The pastel quality is very high. And also the shimmers are very beautiful. This has a couple of darker shades, which means that I can actually use this as standalone palette, because with some pastel palette there is the issue that you need another palette use with them. Also, there was this sort of multi-chrome shade over here that they included for the first time, and yeah, more of a seasonal palette for me, but still a favorite. Then their sort of original, so their original palette that they first came out was this one, so this was the Royal Rose, and they did discontinue this at one point. However, sorry, my my camera stand is bit in a bad place, but I think we'll manage. Yeah, so this was their sort of OG palette, and they did discontinue it, but they did actually restock this last year at some point. And this is how the palette looks like. It has this one shade which is actually called Royal Rose, and I'm really happy that they haven't included this kind of shades in the other palettes, because this is a bit chunky shade to work with. It is quite beautiful when you get it to the lid, but compared to their sort of current shimmer formulas, this is definitely something that I am happy that they no longer have. This is more of a summer palette to me because of the quite bright tones of it, but other than this one shade, the quality of it is quite comparable with their newer ones. And then the Serenity palette, which was the one that made them really famous, and this is what the palette looks like. Not my primary color story, however, I am going to be testing this out again in the first half of this year, to kind of, because I did have this in my rotation last year once, and I felt that I still need to try this out a bit more to get the vibe that do I want to keep this, because this does have a lot of tones also that I don't primarily gravitate towards, but then there are some tones that I do actually like, so this is something that I'm a bit on the fence about, and I need to try more. But yeah, that was the last of my Cosmic Brushes palettes, and no palettes going away from this brand. Next, another indie brand that I do have quite a lot from. I haven't actually counted exactly that. Do I have more Oden's Eye or Glossgods palette? But let's get to the Glossgods one. So first, the original ones. So these were the sort of palettes that made Glossgods really, I'd say, famous in the indie community. They have now reformulated these. So Glossgods kind of did what Oden's Eye did last Christmas, was that Oden's Eye re-released their sort of original holiday palettes, and they came out with the 2 new ones, and Glossgods kind of did the same thing. Well, these actually, but I would have to like emphasize that these actually weren't original like Christmas palettes. They just decided to do that. They reformulated and re-released the Girl in the Moon and Girl in the Mars palettes, and then they brought out 2 new ones. And the first one, let's show the Gal on the Moon. And I haven't tried the reformulated ones, but I would assume that the shades they reformulated were the Gravity and the Big Bang. So these were the sort of very smooth multi-chrome shimmer shades. However, these have the issues that these crease away completely, and I tried these with multiple different kind of bases without a separate eyeshadow base, and in the Gal on the Moon palette there are a couple of similar shades that have exactly the same issues, so I'm assuming, or I'm hoping that since they did reformulate these, that it would have been especially these 2 shades. With the other shades, nothing to complain about, and this is, especially because this is like this sort of very pinky golden toned purple one. Obviously these shimmer shades are the kind of shimmer shades that I primarily gravitate towards. But aside from those 2 shades, still a very beautiful palette, even though this is the sort of older formulation. Then the Girl on the Moon palette. So this is the sort of more blue and green toned one, and again, so in this one had the Eclipse, and then there was the Celestial, and even the Full Moon. Yeah, this is actually like 3 of the shades basically that do the creasing away thing. So aside from those 3 shades, again, nothing to complain about. Very beautiful, even though this is the older formulation, and the shades are very impactful, and they have, some of them have quite strong shifts. But that was the Gal on the Moon. Okay, next then. Dancing in the Sky. So this is their sort of all shimmer green palette. Now I'm thinking that should I get rid of... I do actually use this as a companion palette with the Beautybay Earthy palette when I do want something, because while the Earthy has this sort of very stable, beautiful, shiny Beautybay shimmers, the Beautybay doesn't include any multi-chrome or duochrome shimmers, which I assume is a cost-related issue, because multi-chromes and duochromes do cost more to produce, and I assume Beautybay wants to keep the prices of the palettes relatively affordable, so that is why they don't include shifty shades in theirs. And which I think is a good, because not everyone wants the shifty shades, and for some people the affordability is more important, and the like shimmers that Beautybay do make are very beautiful. But back to the Glossgods palette, because I do use this as a companion palette, even though this isn't sort of my primary colors, I am still going to hold on from this. But I think next year, if I do find out that I don't use this like a ton, then maybe I'll consider at the end of the year that what I want to do with it. Then the Look for Rainbows. So this was their sort of rainbow shimmer palette, and this is actually something that I do use with my Cosmic Brush alongside with some of my Cosmic Brush palette, because the Cosmic Brush palettes that I do have, and I do think, I don't know about the Winter Wonderland palette, what was the shimmer matte ratio, but the older Glossgods palettes, they had the sort of that they had more mattes than shimmers. So that is why I have occasionally felt with those that I do need a palette that has a bit more shimmers to combine with them. So it is a very, like, I would say basic rainbow shimmer palette, but because I do have my uses for this one, that is why it will be staying. And now I'm not going to get the sleeve back on. Then the sort of more neutral palettes that the brand has done, so Vintage Glam, and this is, I think, one of my favorite sort of Glossgods palettes, even though I have to make use of this year. And oh fuck, sorry. Well, my channel is not monetized, so I think one swear word won't be bad. But crap, one of the golden shades is broken. I'm gonna have to see if I will be able to just press that down. I'm very bummed about that, but this is like, because if you're new in this channel, hi, my name is Makeup Hedgehog and I like my pinks and this sort of girly tones, and this has all of them. The shimmers are, again, even though they look bit on the more like neutral side, they actually do have quite a lot of they have a shift to them, and this is just, I think, one of the sort of better combined color stories that the brand has made all together, and I'm just now looking at the gold shade. I'm very upset about that. This is probably not the place you're supposed to start pressing down. I can actually show a bit of the shine. I didn't put a opaque layer on it, but just so you can see a bit of that. I'm trying to avoid swatching in this because otherwise this is gonna be like a horrendously long video. But yeah, Vintage Glam not going anywhere. I'm just now very, I hope I will be able to rescue the golden shade. New neutrals. So I think this was a good alternative if you were thinking about, for example, because we did have also a bit of a neutral palette. So on summertime 2023 we had the trend of green palettes, and then we had this trend of neutral palettes, which was like that there was the Natasha Denona, was it New Nudes or something like that, and then we had the Patrick Ta palette, and then there was the Denisa Myricks sort of all matte palette, and we, aside from the green themed, we had this sort of recoming of neutrals, but this was their sort of like, I think, for a good sort of an indie alternative. Again, all of these like shimmers, they do have a bit of a shift to them. My only issue is that with my palette, this was already a Dutch shade when I got it, so it's the It Factor, and this was like quite dry when I got it, and this year when I used this again, this is basically like a glitter, like feels like a dry glitter or something, so this unfortunately it's not usable because it doesn't stuck to my finger, and it doesn't stick to your lid anymore because it has dried out. But other than that, all the shades are still very beautiful, and if you're looking for a good like a sort of a neutral palette with a twist, I'd say the New Neutrals is a good option. Next, I think, is actually a palette that we will be getting rid of. So this is the Smoke and Mirrors palette. This was a limited edition Christmas palette they came out with 2022. Yes, yeah. And I got to try this at the beginning of like last year, which was why it was included in last year's ranking, even though this was a 2022 release. But why this is going to be getting decluttered is that first, it's quite dupable. This could be a 9 pan and you would get the same amount of looks that you get with this one, with the amount of shade that it has. A lot of the shades look very similar, at least on my skin tone. And second reason is that this is purely a color story thing. It is a bit too grey toned for my taste. I'm someone who has a rose cool undertone, however, because there is the sort of rosy undertone mixed with the cool one, greys, if it's too grey, it will make me look a bit sick. So yeah, good quality, nothing wrong with it, but this is just not a color story that I like, and also the fact that, as I said, it is the palette is within itself quite dupable, so this could have been a lot smaller and we would still get the same amount. But if you manage to get this and you really like your smoky eyes, then nothing to complain. Complain about the quality is just going away because it's not something that I prefer. Next, I'm going to be showing the 2 new ones that they came out with last year. So this is the Color of the Rain palette. This is the sort of in the same series as the sort of All Shimmer Green and the Rainbow Shimmer palette were. And this is how palette looks like. These are all essentially somehow blue shifting shimmers. I still need to, if you're thinking why this looks so rough, is that mine, this the Lavender Skies palette that I will show soon, they got broken in the transit, and I do believe they might have had an issue during the launch of this palette with their sort of the storage house or the place these were shipped from, because I do remember that they just offered to refund me my whole order because they said that they had gotten quite a lot of feedback that the palettes were arriving to people broken, so they were working on the issue, which I assume is that they changed the place that they shipped their palettes from. But at that point they said that it would be just safer if they refunded me everything, and I was very happy with their response, and I said that yeah, okay, mine only had one shade, so it was the light break shade, the red one that I did manage to repress that. I said that that was the only one that was really broken on this one, and it is usable and everything, so I was quite happy and didn't feel the need to demand that they would be at some point sending a new palette. So this is the Lavender Skies palette. This was the next one, the other one that came with the Color of the Rain palette, and similarly the Dreamscape shade was the one that unfortunately broke in this one. But again, managed to repress it, so nothing to complain. Something that I will say about this palette is that unfortunately, even though this looks like a palette that you could use as a standalone palette, and you can use it because it has mattes, but a lot of these purple mattes, unfortunately, at least on my eyes and skin tone, they tend to look the same, and there's also a bit of lack of depth here. So the darkest purple, which is the Purple Storm here, and is actually a more mid-tone shade. So with this one, I was a bit perhaps like, even though the individual shades are very beautiful and I do get use out of this one, but as a whole with this one I was a bit like thinking that they would have needed to do something more with the mattes to make this as a very like sort of cohesive palette, because I do feel that because of the lack of depth and because a lot of the purple shades look with similar, you end up with quite similar looks when using this one. But yeah, that was my last Glossgods palette, and we got rid of one palette from this brand. Blend Bunny. So Blend Bunny is one of the sort of US indie brands that I have been now able to try, because Blend Bunny came to Monolith Shop, which is an European-based retailer for a lot of these popular indie brands that we would otherwise in Europe have to ship from States or some other countries, and it would usually mean higher shipping cost and longer waiting times. With Monolith Shop, it's much easier because they're shipped from inside European Union. Of course, with Monolith there is the fact that they don't get the stuff the same time that the brands release them. They do like a launch once a month, and then you have to sort of be on their Instagram and ready on the website when the launches happen. But anyway, from Blend Bunny I have 3 palettes, and I think we will be getting rid of one, even though it hurts a bit, but there is a good reason for it. So, first one. This was the sort of my late Christmas present that my brother got to me a few days back when this finally arrived. So this was stuck in somewhere on the holiday parcel traffic and didn't make it to me for Christmas, but I'm happy that it did make it. And this is what the Sickly Sweet palette looks like, and I will be very interested to try this, because the palette that we will most likely getting rid of was the palette that sort of well, we will be discussing that soon. But let's just say that I am now going to be very interested in trying this and see how the pastel mattes work with this one, because I have some doubts after the one palette that I will be soon getting rid of. But the Dollhouse palette, this was my favorite Blend Bunny palette, and this is something that initially this is the palette why I'm having faith that the Sickly Sweet palette will have the same good quality that the pastel mattes in this palette have, because the pastel mattes in this one, the quality of them is just beautiful. You only have to like blend one layer to build them, and the shimmers in this are also very beautiful and very smooth. With Blend Bunny you don't get like super shifty shimmers, but the quality of them nonetheless is very great. But the palette we will be getting rid of is this one. So this is the Sugar and Grunge palette, and this is something that did make me doubtful why I, for example, didn't buy the Sickly Sweet palette immediately, because this came last year, and the Dollhouse palette has already like been released before this one. And because I tried the Dollhouse palette before this one, I was very disappointed. Like, I don't know, did I get a bad palette or something, but the sort of pastel quality in my sort of Sugar and Grunge palette, it wasn't the same that the pastel quality was in the Dollhouse one, which made me a bit suspicious about the Sickly Sweet one. So I'm hoping that the Sickly Sweet palette has the sort of same quality that the Dollhouse palette has in terms of the mattes. And also with the shimmers, unfortunately, like this shimmer and this shimmer, so the Prom Queen and Bubblegum, these both are very hard, like hardly pressed. I really have to like dig in my finger to get any payoff from them. The more sort of opaque shimmers, these are like okay, but yeah, because I just like so much wanted to like this palette, because I like the theming of it. I like the color story of it is something, because it has a bit of like color mixed with some more muted tones, so there's so much that I wanted to like about this one, but unfortunately, because I do know that I just didn't get along with that, and I did make a good effort of trying this different things to make it work. But yeah, there's no use keeping a palette in my collection that I know that I just don't like the quality of, so this is the one that is going away, and now I have the Sickly Sweet palette. So I hope that the pastel quality in that one will sort of remedy the brand for me, and I can start liking the brands and the brand's new releases again. Let's go through some palettes quickly that I only have like individual palettes from one brand. So first is a Gourmande Girls, another US indie brand that I had the pleasure of trying last year, and this is the Warriors Wear Pink palette. So this was done in collaboration with Syria Soto, who is a breast cancer survivor, and the palette sort of brought attention to a theme that's, I think, very, very important. So this is what the palette looks like. I really was positively especially surprised about the matte quality. So because sometimes with indie brands they can do this very sort of nice shifty shimmers, but then with the mattes they can be like how should I say, there is a variety in the quality of them, or they might not be the best. But with this one I was very surprised how blendable and how much the mattes built, but how easily they were still to combine. And I really I had quite a lot of Gourmande Girl releases that had come after this one, but so far the only one that I have been like almost buying it was the sort of all purple palette, which was themed I think after Poison Plant, so I can't now get the name in my head. So with that one I was like almost buying it, but there was just something after this one there's been with the Color Story that I've been like almost wanting to buy them, but then there's something that makes me think that it's not that one. So I'm very, because I was quite impressed with the quality of the palette. I'm hoping that this year they will come out with a second palette with a Color Story that I want to get, but this is not going anywhere. Next is a palette that actually just arrived to me today. So Monolith had their sort of, I'm gonna call it their January launch, but basically it happened on the 31st of December, so in New Year's Eve. But this is but they had the Unearthly Dreamer palette, and I was just on the site for this one. And this is actually, I'm gonna open this one up. So this is how the palette looks like. I will be doing some, I think, at least the reels with this in the coming days, or a YouTube shorts, and then I will put it in my rotation and test it out. This is me giving an Unearthly a second chance, because originally when the brand became available at Monolith Shop and everyone was very excited that yay, we're in Europe, we're now gonna get Unearthly, I got two of their 9 pans. I don't remember their names. One was their sort of Valentine's theme palette from a couple of years ago, and one of was their sort of like, it had the sort of fairy, it was very this sort of autumn type of color, but it had the fairy on the cover. And when I tried those two palettes, I didn't get what the hype was about, because while the mattes were, I think, quite good quality, the shimmers particularly were disappointing. But now with this one, and I think the sort of, is it like, it was one of their fall palettes that the owner sort of remastered. So I sort of watched the like, because I think I do like the Unearthly's owner. She's very active on YouTube, and she does like live swatches and shows how she uses her product, and I did see that they have now sort of done an upgrade to their shimmer formula. So I am hoping that this is now the palette that sort of redeems the brand for me, because the original 9 pans that I tried, those really didn't impress me, and I was like thinking that why are people talking about this brand so highly, because I didn't get the hype. So I'm hoping that with this new one there is like, I will now see why so many people love the brand. Next is this one. So this is the Glaminatrix Rich and Romantic, another indie palette that I tried first time next year, and I'm gonna be repeating the rants that I have this one. I love the color story of this so much. The color story, like if I would do a palette, it would be probably quite close to this. But my god, the beautiful shimmers that they like swatch nicely, they look beautiful in the eyes, but all the shimmers crease, and they don't like have the issue that I have mentioned with some, that they crease away completely, but they do crease quite badly, and it isn't even like after that many hours of using the palette. So I am still keeping this. I will be digging this out during the spring and summertime, because I want to give this another chance, and I think I might be getting the NYX glitter glue, which I don't usually like. I don't like to use that shimmer base too often, but with some shades I do occasionally like to use it. But I will be getting a new NYX glitter glue, and I will be giving this another try, and if I can get the shimmers to work with that one, then I'm gonna be happy, because then it means that this palette will get to its like full potential. But without an like separate like sticky glitter base, at least the experience for me with this one wasn't as good, which I'm a bit disappointed, because this was one of those palettes that I really wanted to desperately like because of the color story. And I will have to say, nothing going to complain about the matte quality here, but yeah, this is something that is going to get another chance, but if it doesn't work with the separate glitter glue, then we will have to see, is it a palette that by the end of this year, if it will get decluttered. Then Lethal Cosmetics, so this is a German-based indie brand and another brand that I tried first time this year. And this is in a packaging that has been done to a pre-made palette, but mine is a custom-made, as you can probably see. And I liked Lethal's quality. I will be trying them again, hopefully this year. I am kind of eyeing now that for what sort of like pre-made palettes they will be making, because I don't want to. I didn't get that excited that I want to make another palette of my own. All of the shimmers that I picked for this one, these are the more sort of shiftier shimmers. They have to have some kind of shift, but with these ones I did notice that if you're used to these super opaque and shifty indie shimmers, then Lethal, I'd say it's a good indie brand to start from, but it's not the most, like, you don't get super multi-chrome stuff. So with all of these I do feel that the base of these is a bit more sheer, so you do have to build them a little bit on your lid to have them to the full opaqueness, but nevertheless the shades, the shimmers and the mattes are very beautiful. And I have always said that if you're looking for an European indie brand to start from that isn't as expensive, for example, as maybe some others, then this is a good beginning. Now for a palette that's currently in my palette rotation. I have done one Reels and YouTube shorts from this one, and I'm gonna have to see how I will be reviewing this. Am I gonna include it in a sort of all a review roundup video, or I'm gonna make a separate video of this. So this is the first Ensley Rain palette. So this is the Ensley Rain Harvest Moon, and I think this is one of the most like hyped indie brands, I think, particularly at the end of last year. I am aware there has been some, I wouldn't say controversy, but there has been some like discussion about are they sort of black labeled brand, which means that they would be buying the palettes from a certain pre-made palettes that you can just order from any kind of factory. But I think the owner made it quite clear in her Instagram post that they are no longer like, they actually now do and design the palettes themselves, and the palettes are sort of original designs. And then there's been also some discussion from the brand because they do use AI in their palette design, and I do know that's a subject that divides a lot of people. But I think for me, I did want to give the brand a try. This is a more expensive, like this is one of the most expensive indie brands that there is currently in the market. For me, this palette cost, I think it was around 79 or 89 euros. Definitely up there. I'm not gonna make my final judgment yet that is it worth it. I will have to say the shimmers are like, I can kinda understand in terms of the shimmer shades why the brand is so expensive, but especially now since this also includes mattes and this is kind of a palette you can use as its own. I haven't yet made my judgment about it. Is this a palette that I would say that is it really worth the price? I am waiting, however, I have liked the quality enough that I am now waiting. The Cold Moon palette is something that they released recently, and I am hoping that to Monolith's, I don't know if they're gonna do their next launch, maybe closer to February, but when Monolith does their next launch, I do hope that they will have the Cold Moon palette. But the Harvest Moon definitely staying because I am trying this out currently, and I will be seeing as I try this a couple of times more what my sort of end judgment about the brand and its pricing is about. We're getting to the end of the indie palette, so next let's go through my... And now I'm like completely blanking about the brand. Adept, yes, we're going to Adept Cosmetics. So none of these are going to go away, but I'm showing them. So Sumerian Sunset, this was one of the top indie brand palettes that came out last year. There is something quite magical about this one, and some of these shades are a bit chunkier, but and the mattes, only thing I'm gonna say is that the mattes are quite, they are like the Yalat and the, what's this, Posturonic Net. Yeah, I'm not a Starstruck fan, so I don't know how you're supposed to pronounce these. Unfortunately, from the mattes, only 3 of them are usable because this one and the peachy one, they don't really show up, and I have a light skin tone. But these sort of like the 2 greens and reds you are kinda able to use, but not the best mattes. And hope the matte quality is something that Adept will work on 2024. But in terms of the shimmers, very magical, and this was worth every penny. Plain Jane Remastered, and this is my oldest Adept palette, and this is actually the only Adept palette that I actually ordered from the brand. So this is something that I did import from States, and it took quite many weeks, and it was quite expensive with the shipping and the taxes I had to pay once I imported this. But now I'm happy that I can get the brand from one shop, so it's less cost. But still very beautiful. This is a springtime palette for me, because all of these are, I'd say, quite this sort of spring typical shades. Then the Minka palette, so this one, and this is a bit, I'd say, one-tone palette, so a lot of these silvers, especially in the upper row, they look actually quite similar once you get them to your lid. And also a lot of them are quite chunky. I'd say that this is one of those palettes that if you have a lot of texture on your eye area, then this isn't necessarily a flattering palette on you, because the shimmers and because they are chunky, you can't use them with your brush, or with your fingers you don't have that much, you can't work with as such detail with them. So I say with this one, I've made the consideration that is the formula something that suits your makeup preferences, because the shimmers are quite, even though they are very beautiful and sparkly, they do take some work. But none of these are going away, because these are, Adept is one of those brands that I do generally enjoy using, even though with many of these I do have to use like other palettes, because they are quite shimmer heavy. And last of the indies, so P. Louise, another palette brand that I got to try last year, because I made a Black Friday haul, because I wanted to see what the brand was about. And two palettes. So this is first one, this is the Falling in Love palette, and Fall in Love palette. So this is the sort of, I'm not sure is this a summer palette or a Valentine's palette, but it's, at least for me, looks like very Valentine's themed. Quite basic neutral palette with a pop of pink, keeping in my collection because this is relatively new, and I did like generally I did like P. Louise's quality. Like, as I said, the lighter mattes, particularly in both of these palettes, were something that bit surprised for me, that how much they needed work, and the shimmers like aren't anything super shifty, but the shimmers are still very nice and sparkly, and I do think that it's an alright formula. Then the If Looks Could Chill, and now I'm gonna see if I'm gonna be able to present this in a somehow manageable way, considering that this is one of those two-tiered palettes. So this is how the lower tier looks like, and so we had the sort of more minty teal tier below, and then there's the sort of blue tier below. So again, quality generally, and especially considering that blues are usually a bit harder to formulate, I was actually surprised how well everything worked, if we ignore the fact that the lighter shades again were something that some of them had a bit of skipping on my eyes, but it was still something that when you layered them enough you were able to make them work. Shimmers, again, nothing super like shifty and multichromy, but they are still very nice, these are traditional sparkly shimmers. This isn't, we all know this isn't this color story, and especially after getting this one, I don't, for example, need the Cosmic Forces Wonderland one, even though that would have more sort of special shades, but because the colors, I now have like a full-on bright blue palette, I don't need any more, especially the one that's two-tiered. But this is again something that is going to be staying, because now I at least do have one like primary blue palette, and I actually do like the teal side, which is the here below. I did actually do like the teal and mint side of this, so I know I'm not gonna get like a super lot of use out of this, but I do know that there will be occasions that I will be digging this out. So yeah, but none of the P. Louise's palettes are going away, because that's a relatively new brand in my collection. Okay, yeah. So higher end brands, and I have to say that I think it's quite obvious when I looked at my sort of makeup spending from last year, because I do actually keep an Excel, and we're not gonna go to euros how much I spend on makeup, because it's a lot, but I'd say that this is my hobby, and you just have to accept it, that there is a certain amount of money that I do like to put with this one, and I'm not a person that goes on depth because of my makeup, and I would never recommend to anyone going that route, but I have a certain makeup budget that I have counted from sort of my income that I can use, and in previous years I think it's quite obvious that I did collect quite a lot of higher-end makeup, but that's because of availability. So as perhaps something that I did indicate already when discussing indie palettes, these sort of very popular, for example, US indie brands, they used to be really difficult to have them available here for someone living in Europe. And also in Europe we didn't have that many of our own indie brands. Now I think there's quite a lot of more sort of European indie brands that are easier to get, and as I said, we now have Monolith shop which stocks a lot of the sort of US indie releases, and I think that shows quite well that because I have spent more of my money on the indie releases, then it's out of something, and I think it's out of the higher end palettes. And I'd say that because the indie palettes, because in some of the indie palettes they cost as much as the higher end palettes, however, indie palettes have had special shades in them, which makes them more interesting than spending my money on a higher end palette that has maybe a color story that is something that I already have in my collection, or it's quite similar that we have already seen in the market. So I say that for higher end brands, even though there will always be a market for the traditional higher end brands, I think there is definitely something like that the higher end brands at some point do have to perhaps consider that because they are asking for higher prices, then what is the justification for that price? And I'm not gonna, of course, answer that because it's very subjective and we all have different makeup preferences, but I think some of the higher end brands, I think Pat McGrath, for example, is a brand that there is really like a question, because Pat McGrath used to be the brand that they charged quite a lot, but they had this, the brand did this sort of special effect and they had like special shades in their palettes. But now that we have seen the direction that Pat McGrath has gone to, I don't think there, for example, with that particular brand, there's justifications anymore why the brand is asking for such higher prices when you can get something special from an indie brand, usually with less money. But yeah, that was my sort of like introduction and sort of like reasoning. You will be seeing that there isn't actually that, like there are a lot here, but not that much perhaps that maybe if we would have done this 2 or 3 years ago. Let's first go to the Natasha Denona palettes. I think we will start with this one. My dream palette. I do have to say, this isn't actually a color story that I prefer. I do like my warm tone neutrals, but something about the tone of these, I don't know what is it, because I have used the palette decent amount and I do think the looks I come out with this are all quite beautiful, but there's just something in this that I don't know. I have a bit odd relationship with this one. The palette is not going anywhere. I still want to keep it in my collection, but just so you're aware, it's not my favorites for some reason. So pastel palette. This is a companion palette, so you probably can use it. I'm gonna sneak peek it. So I have the Circle the Loco palette. I use this in conjunction with the Circle the Loco palette. I can't use this as a standalone palette. Very beautiful pastels, but as I have said, if you only occasionally use pastel shades, then I would look into other, for example, some other maybe not so like, I wouldn't like maybe spend 60 or 70 euros to a pastel palette if you only use them seasonally. But if you do like Natasha Denona want to spend the money, I do think that the quality of this is very good. This is my favorite Natasha Denona palette, so this is the retro palette and this is how it looks like. And so this is my, I think, like it has sort of mauvey rosy tones, but there are a bit of silver, there's a bit of like dark metallic silver here, and I think this is one of the like better combos that Natasha Denona has done in terms of color story. Would I wish that this would have maybe, if she would maybe redo this with her upgraded shimmer formula, which I actually have never tried because I don't have, you will soon see which is the newest palette from Natasha Denona that I have from the brand. And, the My Dream is the newest because the My Dream was released in the beginning of, was it in the beginning of 2023? I got the palette in 2023 and it was in the beginning of the year. That was released at the end of 2022. But anyway, the My Dream palette is the newest one that I have from the brand, and after that the brand in the newer palettes that Natasha Denona came out with last summer, there has been this sort of very upgraded shiny like shimmer formula, which is not included in the older ones, but I would particularly especially hope with this one that she would bring this with an upgraded shimmer formula, because while this is beautiful, unfortunately the shimmers aren't, for example, what for example some newer palettes bring. Then we have the, this is the Retro Glam palette. What I'm gonna do with this one is that I am going to be trying, I'm gonna put this in my rotation this spring, and because I wasn't hugely impressed with this one when I got it and tried it first time last year. And the reason was that particularly I think this suffered from the fact that it is very dupeable palette again with its own. These two pinks basically look quite identical on the eyes. These two browns look very similar. These two darker greens, even these two shades, like this is one of those palettes that I will say again, this could have been a 9 pan and you would get the same amount of looks with this one. And that is why I was like, when I realized that after a week of trying this, I went like that, dang, I spent like, back then she still hadn't raised the prices, so this was still 60. I think I got this with 65 euros. I may have had like a bit of like a discount or something, but I paid a bit over 60 euros for this one, and I was like that, dang, I paid over 6 euros for a palette that basically creates quite similar looks, even though it looks like it has a lot of shades. So yeah, something that I will, as I said, I will put this in my rotation during this spring, but if I still feel that it's not as appealing as perhaps it looked when it was originally like launched and the marketing message made it look like, then I might be getting rid of it. This is the last one, so this is the Circle de Loco, and this is the only bigger palette that I own from her. I managed to get this on a really I got this on a discount, so I only paid 60 euros for this one. I would have never bought this with the over 100 euro price that this originally goes, and I do think that Natasha herself has realized that maybe because of the general like situation in how economy is, I think Natasha hasn't released any of the bigger palettes anymore because she knows that people aren't exactly willing to buy those. And I think the midi format is much more better, because also in terms of like people who especially like, if you of course only use one palette every day all day, then it could make sense to buy a palette with big pans, but these pan sizes for example are something that I'm never gonna like use this up. But again, this is something that I use with the pastel palette, and I have tried to, I did when I originally got this, because this obviously I got this before the pastel one. So I have been able to make a few standalone looks with this one, but this does benefit from the pastel palette, because the pastel palette has it has a bit more light in and up shades, and it also has a bit of lighter shimmers, because this also has quite a few of these more darker shimmers, meaning that if you use this as a standalone palette, I felt that every time that I did create a look with this, I felt that quite many of the looks were quite dark. But yeah, also not going anywhere, but it's not something that I use as a standalone. But generally, like, as you saw, no Natasha Denona palettes going out, but some of them are maybe a bit under consideration, that how my feelings about makeup will change during this year, that maybe some of them at the end of this year might not be in my collection anymore, but I'm very interested to see that if I will be getting, because last year I actually didn't, aside from the My Dream palette which I got in the beginning of the year, I really didn't, and did Retrogram also come last year or the year before that? I'm not sure, I'm actually sure, you're gonna probably, someone's gonna scream it to me that what was the order, but generally, because during, especially at the end fall time when she was releasing, like the Yucca palette came out and then the nude palette came out, I think it was neutral palette, the neutral palette, I didn't get any of those because I felt that there were just other palettes that I wanted to spend my money on, so I will have to see, is this year going to continue that trend, that I do think that the palettes that she comes out with, that they are like, that they are nice and the color stories are nice, but do I still have the feeling that, well, they are nice, but I want to spend my money on something else. So interested to see, because Natasha Denona used to be a brand that I just automatically bought. I didn't, if she came out with the bigger ones, I didn't buy those because those were just out of my budget, but all the midis were like almost immediately that I need to get that one, but not the case any longer. Next, let's go to some, I'd say, individuals from few quads. So this is the Charlotte Tilbury, this is the Pillow Talk luxury palette. So was this the, yeah, Pillow Talk Team Dreams luxury palette, and with this one I'm gonna actually see if I can bring it a bit closer to the camera. Very beautiful. It is it looks more brown, it's because of the lighting. I'm filming on in my bedroom and I can't get the sort of ring light on, so that is why everything's a bit yellow. yellow toned, but I will see if I can do something with the editing. So this looks quite brown, but this is actually more like burgundy leaning. It's not completely like red burgundy, but it is this like more reddish leaning brown than a neutral brown. Very beautiful. Only issue with it is that this one shade, this came loose like quite soon after I got the palette, so this wasn't pressed properly. So I can't unfortunately travel with this one, which does defeat the purpose of getting a smaller palette. But I am keeping this. This is the only Charlotte Tilbury palette that I own. And I do like that there is like only one kind of look that I create with this one, but it is like, I'd say the quality is decent. Is it like worth the quad prices that Charlotte Tilbury asked, which is either now going like almost to 50 euros? Not necessarily. I would try to get these on sale, but if you can get these like lower than their like normal price, then I'd say that these are very, like, I can understand the customer this is too. Next is the Chanel palette, and this is the only Chanel palette that I own. So this is the Lumiere Graphique Holiday palette. And this is the holiday quint that I did like. We will be seeing a quint that will be getting out of my collection, like for a good reason, because yeah. But the Chanel one, keeping again. This is, I did like that actually, even though it might actually look a bit warm. This is actually quite nice. This sort of very, it's a cool toned palette, but it's not in your face cool toned palette, and I do like the sort of 20s glamorous, 20s inspired glamorous looks you can create with this one. But another keep. And then let's go to this one, and this is the Byredo. I'm sorry you're now seeing my camera. I'm gonna now Remembrance palette. So this is the Byredo Remembrance, and I ranked this quite highly amongst my higher end palettes I ranked from last year. I am hoping that we will soon, because they tend to release these bigger palettes on springtime. Other times Byredo, they come out with the quints. I haven't found the need to buy the quints because I feel those are quite expensive for what they are. But I'm hoping that they will come out this spring with this sort of, again, another bigger palette, because I really enjoyed the quality of this one. I have liked the looks that I created with this. But yeah, no palettes going away from these sort of individual higher end palettes that I own. So ABH. From ABH I have only two palettes. So we have the original Sultry, and then we have this one, which what was the Fall Romance. So I'm gonna keep the Sultry. This is getting old, but this was a gift, Christmas gift from my husband. And I don't have this sort of very cool toned neutral palette. I have like some palettes that have a few shades from, I'm sorry, that's my phone is going on right now. But this is one of the few cool toned palettes that I do have, like that is like has these all shades in one palette. So I am still keeping this, but this is getting old, and I will have to like super observe that if something starts happening with the shimmer shades or with the matte shades. But I am going to still keep this. I have used this quite a lot during the years, but yeah. But I think at the end of like this year I will have to start like declutter this, because it is like getting old. But so this will be this palette sort of last year in use, but I have really loved this, and I have like used I haven't only used a lot of this because it was a gift from my husband, but because this is like it is kind of unique from the palettes that I own. This is the Fall Romance palette. I know this got a lot of varying reviews, but I like this. I do think that Natasha Denona definitely Anastasia Beverly Hills. I do think ABH upgraded her shimmer formula in this one, and I do think that the shimmers carry more impact than, for example, the shimmers in the Sultry palette. The matte shades are also improved. They are still a bit of powdery and kick-uppy, but I don't think they are as kick-uppy as ABH had in her sort of original palettes. But I like the color story of this one, and I have liked all the looks that I have created with this one, so this is another keep. Next, let's go to Huda Beauty, and from Huda I have two palettes. These are both older palettes. I think at one point Huda Beauty was a brand that I was always very keen on seeing what the brand comes out with, and I have tried her like smaller 9-pan palettes previously. However, the quality of those was never really that impressive. However, these bigger palettes I have liked, but I think recently, because she only releases these bigger palettes once a year, usually before Christmas, I haven't been liking the color story during the last couple of years, so that's why I'd say that my Huda Beauty collection hasn't been growing in recent years. But this is the Naughty palette. This is the sort of reddish burgundy palette with a pops of like purple and pink and some neutrals in it. Very beautiful, not getting rid of it. The formula is still good. I am at some point a bit worried how this shade is gonna... This gel shade is gonna age. I'm happy that she no longer puts these in her palettes because these were like really quite useless, but a beautiful color story. I like it, not going anywhere. And then still my favorite Huda Beauty palette, which is this one. So this is the Rose Quartz one. Yeah. So this is something that I especially use every springtime. This is, I think, one of the sort of OG like this is, I think, a perfect cool tone palette for my particular undertone. So it is cool toned, but it's a bit pink leaning, and there's a bit of like mauviness to it. So it is not like, because as I said with my, even though I have a cool undertone, but it's a cool rosy one, so completely grey palettes don't suit me. But this one has a coolness to it, but it has, because it has a bit of pink and mauviness, it suits me really well. And generally all the looks that I come out with this, they are always very, so because of the sort of shimmers this has, they are sort of very dimensional, and the sparkles are very beautiful. And I think this is still like one of the best color stories and best palettes Huda Beauty has produced to this date. Alright, Tarte. So Tarte was a brand that I tried first time. I didn't know, I tried the brand first time on 2022, but I only had a blush palette from them, which was a gift from my brother in holidays. So I had tried their sort of like blush palette, and I was quite impressed. So in 2023, when I went traveling to a few countries that had Sephora to them, because Tarte is one of those brands that's not available here where I live, I can only order it from few places online. But I wanted to sort of see what products I got on store, so when I visited a few countries that had a Sephora, I did buy not only a few eyeshadow palettes from there, also a couple of lip products and then mascara I tried from last year. First is this one, so this is the Big Ego palette. I know this hasn't gotten raving reviews, however I have actually liked the quality of this one. I will say about the Tarte matte formula, it is on the more buildable side, so if you're used to these very super opaque mattes that, for example, a lot of indie palettes have, then this will seem quite bland. But I have sort of liked the shades and shimmer shades and the mattes that I have used with this one, and I am happy that I did get this. However, a palette that I will be getting rid of is this one. So this is the Tartelette palette, and this is one of those palettes that looked much more exciting than it was actually in use. So this sort of, when I initially saw the color story of this, it gave the impression that this had more variety to it, but actually this, even though it sort of has this sort of darker shades in this corner, you will most likely always get this sort of pinky golden look with this one, and it's just something to do with the undertones, I think, that all the shades in this has. So nothing against the quality of this one, it's just that this is very like one trick pony again, and I have pinky golds in my collection plenty, so this is also not something super special that I would want to keep it for its colors as they are, because the looks, I will get similar looks with other palettes that have even bit more exciting shades in them. So yeah, the Tartelette Energy is something that we will be getting rid of, but the Big Ego is staying from the brand. Dior. So from Dior we have one palette from their main line and one palette from their backstage line, and if you watched my higher end palette ranking from last year, I think you will be knowing which one is going and which one is staying. So this is something that I ranked very highly amongst not only my higher end palettes, but in my sort of overall palette ranking of the year. So this is the Backstage Silver Essentials, and I am hoping now that they came out with this sort of Smoky Essentials palette that still hasn't become available where I live, but I am hoping that that also has the same quality as this one, because this is a palette that got me excited about Dior. So while this doesn't have anything like super shifty shades or even super sparkly shades, there's just something about the quality of this one, and how, even though it has this sort of very dark shades in this corner, how easily they still blend, but you still get a lot of depth, and just how beautifully everything in this goes together. And it's just that this is, as I said, something that made me excited about the brand. And Dior is one of those traditional department store luxury brands that perhaps weren't on my radar because the perception I have from those brands in general. However, exactly opposite of is this one. So this is again why I have been avoiding brands like Dior. So this is their one of the two holiday quints from last year, and thank God I only bought one. So this is the Promenade Doré, and this was like one of the most expensive misbuys I perhaps made from last year. So I did get this on a discount, but even with a discount it was still like expensive because it's Dior, and I'm just... The three golds look quite identical in the eyes, there's still nothing unordinary. The brown in this corner gives some depth, the silver is the only like that makes this bit interesting, but also what disappointed me with me in this was the like durability. So these are shades that didn't last that well, even though I would have been on a shorter work day. I found it at the end of the day that the shades had creased or they had faded, and that is an issue, for example, that I did not have with the Backstage one. And this is something that I actually praised for its durability, and which I said that these like lasted me even like days when I had to do work and I had a workout after that, and even after a sweaty workout the shadows were still on my lids. With this one, exactly like the opposite, and considering that this is the more expensive compared to the Backstage one, I have like made the decision that I'm just not buying that. Like I'm not gonna, like, it's not worth trying the quints unless there like happens something like something extraordinary, like that every YouTuber and every like social media influencer will start saying that Dior did something magical with their quint formula, then I will change my mind, but not like this just didn't impress me, and this is one of those buys that made me think that why did I spend my money on this. So yeah, the Backstage line staying, and excited to see what it has. Quint, holiday quint going away, and not at least so far buying any more quints from the brand. Last of the higher end palettes. So, and this is the last like palettes in general, so we're getting at the end and my voice is getting a bit scratchy, so we also know that I've been filming for a long time. Pat McGrath. So Pat McGrath used to be a brand that could do no wrong, and I think that how the mighty has fallen has been quite spectacular to watch, and yeah. So there is actually going to be something that we will be decluttering, which is something that I would not have even thought of a few years ago when the brand's releases were all very solid. They were something that got me excited, and I was like that the brand was like the best thing, even though it was very expensive, and I was still well, I wasn't anymore in the first job after my graduation, so my, how should I say, my income wasn't like that bad. I was actually making like already, I would say, like a decent income, but it was still like at a time when I was still like, it wasn't that long after my graduation, and I was still like sort of getting used to the having a full day work income and sort of climbing up the sort of career ladder. But anyway, a few years ago, no Pat McGrath would have ever gotten decluttered, but now I think this brand has really like fallen out of the grace. Two palettes that we're not getting rid of. So these are the holiday palettes from 2023 and 2024. So this is a palette that is staying because I do like the quality of these. So this was the, I'm gonna check now, Celestial Nirvana Nude Allure, and the quality of this one, very nice. All the shimmers are very creamy. This is a palette that I every time I make a look with this one, it's very like very sort of beautiful. It's very sort of classical look, and generally just how easy this is to work with is always a pleasure. This was the next one is the Lunar Nightshade. So this was from the 2023 holiday collection, and you're seeing the bigger palette under it. So this is the palette that is staying from that collection. This one was a dud, which I did give this quite a lot of crap from, because this is the only matte in this particular palette. Some of the palettes in there, because they actually came out with 5 of these on 2023, and this was actually like, some of the palettes had 2 matte shades, this only had 1, and I did give quite a lot of critique for it, that if you only have like 1 matte shade in a quint, it should work. So that's the only like negative side of it. I did also say that these two did look a bit similar, but the shimmers again in this one, very smooth, very creamy, and this is a bit like on the original side, considering how much pink Pat McGrath has been releasing, that I am keeping this. However, what is going away is this one. So this is the Starstruck Splendor. So she came out with 2 of these bigger ones, and I'm now going to get this. We'll be moving those, so yeah. This is just very like unoriginal. The only, like I already said in my review, I like the blushes the most in this one, and this one, because this is a repeat, I have this in, I think I might even have an individual blush of it, and I might have it even in another blush like palette. But this one coral blush isn't worth keeping the whole palette. So what I said about this one, especially comparing it to the Quint, was that these sort of shimmer shades, while they are very nice shimmers, they actually feel a bit dry when you apply, if you use your fingers to apply them. And this is just very like unoriginal. Like I haven't, like after I did my sort of testing out with this one, and after I did my sort of holiday palette videos and end of the year ranking videos, I haven't even like thought once about using this one. So this is going away purely because unfortunately it's just very boring, and this I think shows that why Pat McGrath generally, why the brand isn't doing well, because the brand used to be known for creating such like eye-catching and sort of unique combinations. But this is just something that we have seen so many times, not only from Pat McGrath, but from like other brands. So yeah, that is going away. Motherships. No motherships are getting decluttered, but I will show them, and immediately as I will get them open because these ones. So this is the Utopian Dream palette, and now I have to check which side I have to open this up. And here is what the palette looks like. I actually ranked this as my first high-end palette from last year, which was a bit of an odd conclusion, but I still actually hold my opinion that, because as I said, the higher end palettes that I have been trying recently, I have just felt that there's been like, particularly indie palettes that I have wanted to spend my money on rather than traditional higher end palettes. So this just sort of made it to the top amongst all the sort of higher end palettes that I did not have such strong feelings towards as perhaps some other palettes that I bought during last year. But very beautiful. This still had the sort of like super shiny baked formula, so these 3 shades, because now the motherships no longer even have that kind of formula, and Pat McGrath is still asking for the horrendous prices that these sell for. So yeah, I have gotten mine on sale, and I have always said that just buy Pat McGrath on sale, because she needs to, apparently to keep money coming in, she has to run those constantly these days. But I'm not surprised, again, as I have said, that how, like, from where the brand started and now where they have landed, it's not, like, I'm not surprised that the brand isn't doing that well. But yeah, keeping, and I do, even though it is on the sort of pink sort of purple gold sphere that a lot of Pat McGrath products have been on lately, it is still, there is some uniqueness to it, and I don't want to get rid of it, and I do like the looks that I have created with this one. Next one is the Divine Rose 2. This is I'm gonna see. I should have maybe opened this before filming, because this is very awkward opening this live. The Divine Rose 2 had this sort of special made pink packaging that I do think that she should perhaps consider making more to with her palettes. This is, I think, what sort of like topped the Pat McGrath's, like where Pat McGrath has stuck ever since. Like, this feels that after this one, the brand decided that they only wanted to do pinks and golds, and ever since this palette came out, all her releases have looked like a reiteration of this one. But again, this still has the original sort of baked special shade formula, so these 4 shades over here. And again, this is a color story that I do like, and this still had some of the uniqueness that I think the newer motherships and newer palettes that the brand has generally come out with lack. And it is another keep. This is a primarily a summer palette. Summer palette for me due to the color story. And then my most used mothership, even though it is the, I think, least exciting one that I own, but so this is the Divine Rose 1. Again, it had the 4 baked shades over here, and this is just, I have like said this in so many, especially like if you're looking for a good office palette that transforms into a sort of glamorous party palette, then this is everything you need, because it has this sort of very stable neutral leaning brown shades, and then it has the 4 special shades, especially this like very sparkly one over here that you can just turn any look into a celebration look. And I think even though it is quite basic, that is because the basicness of it is a reason why it has still managed and will still stay within my collection. But yeah, no motherships going. Something that I will be getting rid of, even though this makes me a bit sad, because I know this wasn't a more popular release, but I actually like this one. So this was from her Christmas palettes 2021 or 2022. Someone's gonna be probably telling me which one was it. And I actually like this one. However, I haven't used this as a holiday palette. I use this as a spring palette, and the reason why I use this as a spring palette is that because it has this sort of brighter greens, there is the brighter like yellow, this more orangey shade, and even I think that some of these pinks are like more something that I gravitate towards during springtime. However, I do think that now that I have this sort of indie multichrome palettes that have come to my collection after I have bought this. So when I got this was sort of like very special on its own, and it had this sort of like, yeah, none of these shimmers were like really shifty, but the shimmers were still very like good quality, and considering the price of this and how many shades you got, I do think this was a good value of its time when it came to the market in terms of buying Pat McGrath. But it is, I think, now time to say goodbye to this one, even though I do really like it. But I do think that because the makeup market and my makeup collection, because it has changed so much ever since this came out, it is time to let this one go, because I do feel that I don't gravitate towards this anymore, and it's just a palette that I think like other palettes just have gone over this one when I think about which palettes I want to use. But yeah, that was the sort of last one, and yeah, some Pat McGrath going away from my collection, which is something that I would have honestly never thought a few years ago. But still, some like plenty of staying. As I said, no motherships are getting decluttered. We will have to see if that day will come one day, but so far not yet. So we're done. Quite many. I didn't count yet how many palettes we're getting rid of, but I'm looking at the pile behind me, and this was definitely a larger declutter than the one I did during the October time, so I think it was quite obvious that, yeah, there was also a lot of palettes. End of the year tends to be a season that a lot of palettes come into my collection, but in the same time I do think that because I have been maybe, even though I have been buying a lot this year, but I have also been more mindful about it, at which palettes I actually do use and do gravitate towards, and I no longer just like, I have a limited space in my like drawers how much I can keep, and I have like now, I think like I no longer have the need to keep in palettes, because I think that I should collect them somehow, because there's just limited space, and we all know that there's going to be more exciting releases in the coming year, so there's not going to be an end to eyeshadow palette releases anytime soon. So considering also that I do have to like be realistic and know that there are just some palettes that will be left behind and will not get used, and then there are of course that with some palettes also that the palettes do age, and even though your palettes would not get moldy, their formula still tends to age, and with some formulas it is more obvious than others. Some formulas will last really well, but some formulas just don't. The time doesn't do any good for those, so that's also something to consider. But yeah, that was sort of very long, and I'd say maybe even a bit ranty eyeshadow palette collection video and declutter. But if you like this video, then push the like button, subscribe to the channel, and of course comment below what are palettes that you are excited to use this year, what are palettes that you're getting rid of. Are you on a low buy or no buy this year, or are you like, have you had a change in your makeup preferences in the past year, or how you are going to be approaching your makeup purchases in the coming year. But I'm happy that you have watched this video, even though it was very long, and I hope I will see you in my next video. Bye bye!